Okay, sweet. When and where were you born?
Well, I came from Indiana
Okay.
a few years ago, 1941.
Yeah, years ago.
But I came out here in 1969, I guess was the first time I came west.
Then did you just stick around right after that, or what did?
Well, my first trip out here was when I was between my freshman and sophomore in college. And then as soon as I got out of college, I came out here to stay. But little duty with Uncle Sam, and that kind of slowed me down a little bit. But then, as far as being in Montana, I worked for the Forest Service, so I was different places: Idaho, Alaska, Oregon, Arkansas, and I worked here from Seeley Lake from 1975 to 85, and then I moved to Oregon and retired over there in 96, and I couldn't find the perfect place to retire. This was as close as there was to, so I came back here.
Yeah, sweet.
You can put it on the table, you guys.
Yeah, I know. Fine, but that's, you already answered that.
Okay. So, what are some big memories or big events that you remember that pop into your mind when you think about this area?
Well, I was introduced to this area through my job, and so that was a great pleasure and honor because it's such a great area. So I had a lot of neat outdoor experiences here. Sometimes feeling just a little bit guilty because I was getting paid to do things that other people pay big money for, like trips into the wilderness and just out scouting around and that sort of stuff. So I've been here since '75, and there's been a lot of changes in the community since then. And I guess one thing that has kind of struck me is it's kind of mellowed out. Because back in when I first came up here, it had already mellowed out a little bit because it was kind of a wild loggers town historically.
Yeah.
But I always remember the 4th of July here in earlier days when it was just, everything was crazy. The biker gangs would come into town. They had a big mud rally out on the north end of town, so there was all sorts of four-wheelers of the mud stuff and people camping in the campgrounds would empty out and go into the bars, and then the bars would close, and then we'd go back to the campgrounds to party. So it was just the 4th of July was something that always sticks in my mind around here as really wild and crazy.
Yeah.
We always camp at Camp Paxson once a year.
Yeah.
At the Boy Scout camp, and we were in the 4th of July parade.
Oh.
Not last year. Well, no, last year. This year we canceled our annual camp, but yeah, the parade was super fun. We've been here on the 4th of July before, but this was the first year we were at the camp.
I participated in the parade once with Lewis and Clark at that bicentennial.
Okay.
And it was really a big thrill to participate, but you go down the street and I don't know, Nathan has his sky cam and thinks there's 5,000 people along the street, so it's really a big deal. And when I first came out, it was really kind of awe-inspiring, really, because people were cheering. It was really, really great.
Yeah. Aw, fun.
Do you love summer visitors, or do you miss the peace and quiet? Wow, like all the visitors are here.
Well, of course, maybe not of course, but spring and fall and winter when it's not quite so busy is more enjoyable around here. one thing I constantly reminded of is, you know, back in the day, well, Tim Haynes used to be the principal here, and this was back like in probably late 80s, I suppose, or early 90s. But I met him in the post office down there one time, and he was grumbling because so damn much traffic around here. We used to didn't even slow down to come over the highway. Now we gotta wait for 2 or 3 vehicles. So now this time of year, if I only have to wait for 2 or 3 vehicles, it's nice because it's more like a dozen or so that you have to wait by. So, you know, that's another indication of the change in the traffic and whatnot up in this quiet little village.
And it still gets like a lot more sleepy in the, like after this weekend, will it calm down probably?
Normally you would think so, but nothing's normal this year.
Okay, sure.
Because it's been like the 4th of July every weekend up here since late May.
Weird.
On weekends especially, and even during the week is this year, you know, way busier than normal than I remember.
Yeah, okay. You have other ones?
So we were at Camp Paxson in 2017 when there was that big fire. Do you remember any other fires from?
Besides the Rice Ridge
Yeah.
fire?
Well, there was a big one, not quite as big, in 2007, what they called the Jocko Lakes Fire. And it stopped right at the skyline here.
Oh.
And it started, and I think that was there's a display downstairs about the 1910 fire.
Oh yeah.
Most of that Jocko Lakes fire, I think, was a reburn 100 years later of that 1910 fire.
Cool.
But this is a pretty fire-prone area. And when I worked for the Forest Service here, the fire people didn't like to work here because they call it the asbestos district. We never had very many fires up here because, you know, firefighters like to have fires to keep them busy. But, so they were really happy when we had a fire, or if they get shipped off to someplace else so they could do their fire stuff.
Huh.
But about every, well, there's probably I would say a half a dozen of what you would call big fires in this valley over the last 100 years. You know, that's a natural cycle of forest. Forest burning is nothing new. It happens all the time, every so often.
And then we had one last question, and that was, what's the main industry in this area? And you talked a lot about logging, and do you or did you participate in that?
Well, I participated in logging, working for the Forest Service.
Yeah.
My first 10 years, that's what I did, was timber management.
Okay.
In the Missoula area, in the Idaho area. And then I got into things other than timber management in the Forest Service. And then I got into what I would call my ankle chained to a desk period. So, yeah, the economy here is kind of a 3-pronged now. It started out being kind of 2-pronged. It's always been timber started, and as soon as the timber people come up here, I guess the word started spreading. It was such a neat area. And so, like 1907 was when the logging started here. And then about 10 years later, the Forest started renting cabins along the lake, so the recreation people started coming. And during that 1910 to 1930 era, it was kind of a dude ranch sort of a atmosphere. People were riding on their horses and that sort of stuff. And then, you know, things happened as far as the Great Depression and that sort of stuff, and things kind of mellowed out until World War II. And then after World War II, things started booming again with the logging, and then so I would say from World War II, like, you know, the late 40s through the 60s was basically a timber economy with the weekenders coming up here on the weekends. And then, especially with the advent of the internet, earlier times, our tourists came from eastern Montana.
Yeah.
And when the Rancher subdivision happened here, a lot of the people that bought property here were from eastern Montana and Missoula and Helen, just these nearby areas. But when the internet sprung up, 10, 15 years ago, people started coming from everywhere. It wasn't, and that's one thing, we were just talking about that the other day. Well, a friend of mine, our next door neighbor, she's a Montanan, but her whole career had been in California. And so when she comes up here, she has 2 cars. She drives up here in her California car, and she has her Montana car here that stays here. And she says, and I asked her, I said, well, anyway, what she says is when I'm in my California cars, people treat me a lot different than they do in my Montana car. And I said, well, that may be, but maybe you have a little self-conscious about that too. But the thing I've noticed since I've been here for 40, 50 years or so, like I say, back in the earlier days, these out-of-towners or foreigners, whatever you call them, there's more of a negative atmosphere as far as the locals. But these days, and especially California, 15, 20 years ago, you say California, that was a dirty word. Well, anymore, people are just as likely to be from Texas or Massachusetts or Georgia or Hawaii or anywhere in the whole world as California. So that has all kind of settled down a little bit. People don't get so antsy about somebody from California. But we still do get a little bit upset about all these people that come to this great, fantastic place because it's a great, fantastic place. And then they want to turn around and make it like it was where they came from.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a social rub here.
Yeah.
And that kind of relates to I guess we got off track about the economy, but like I say, the logging and the tourism. But the thing that's in the top 3 these days, economy-wise, is retirement income in the area.
Sure.
So it's kind of a 3-legged stool, is lumber, logging, outdoors, nature-related, natural resources, and tourism, and retirees.
Sweet. I think that's all that we had.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hey, your Camp Paxton thing, that's one of my fond memories too. When I worked for the Forest Service, one of my responsibilities was kind of overseeing the Camp Paxton because it's on National Forest land, and it's a permit with the National Forest, U.S. Forest Service to operate that facility. So I was over there regularly. But I was over there one time, and one of the camp counselors, I talked to one of the camp counselors, and she was telling about some of the things going there. And she said, one of my favorite things here is Wee Willie Wonka. You know what Wee Willie Wonka? No, I didn't know that story. Well, she says, oftentimes the kids that come here, it's their first time away from home, and so they're getting homesick. And one way we deal with homesickness here is we have them write a letter to Wee Willie Wonka, and there's a big log out back, this big around, it's got a hole in the middle of it. And so we have the kids take their letter to Wee Willie Wonka and put it in that, and Wee Willie Wonka's post office is back there in that hole. And then at night we go in and get the letter out and read it and answer it and put it back in. So then the kids come back the next day with their letter from Wee Willie Wonka, for address whatever their homesick problem is. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, that is pretty awesome.
I wonder, do they still do that?
I don't know.
We should look for that log.
Actually, I doubt it because it's been 3 years ago. I was over there talking to the caretaker, and I didn't ring any bells with him. But maybe that's something
You've been, like,
as a caretaker you wouldn't call him to anyway. I don't know.
Sure. Okay. Huh.
That was,
Oh, I
That was
love
just-
that.
I think, I don't remember which group that was. It may have been the Campfire Girls or something like that. I don't remember.
Okay. I love that idea.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But another Camp Paxton story that I really like is kind of the history of that place. It started way back in like 1919 or something like that as a Boy Scout camp.
Mm-hmm.
And there was nothing there except the forest.
Yeah.
And they were a tin camp. And they often rode or walked from Missoula to camp.
Mm-hmm.
And story is that one time a kid over in Flathead Lake heard about this Boy Scout camp over here.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to be a Boy Scout. So he hopped on his pony and rode 100 miles around up through Big Fork and down here to camp. I don't even know the name at the time, probably wasn't, but that Boy Scout camp. And he rode in and said, I want to be a Boy Scout. And they said, great. So given him the paper to fill out, he got down age 11. Oh, sorry, you're too young to be a Boy Scout. You got to be 12.
After all that.
After all that, yeah. So, you know, that was but the thing is that was not today we are amazed that some kid by himself, 11-year-old, would hop on a horse.
Right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
The thing
Yeah, that's
is,
unheard of.
it was not unusual then, because many of the stories about what kids did here in the like 1920s and 30s, that pioneer era, they would frequently do that very same thing. They'd hop over into the wilderness, they'd get on their horse and be gone for 2 or 3 days. It was just something the kids did.
It's pretty awesome.
Could you imagine? You guys should do that.
Yeah, we'll just get a couple horses. There we go.
Aww.
Sweet. Well, thank you.
Okay, we should go check out the museum.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Thank you, Ron.
Yeah, thank
So
you.
what kind of a project are you working on?
Oh, I don't even know.